welcome on into the Midnight Book Club. And tonight you're in for a treat. We're continuing our deep dive through Encounters by DW Pasulka. Experiences with non-human intelligences, explorations with UFOs, dreams, angels, AI, and other dimensions. All the freaking good stuff. Tonight, we're going to learn about a soldier who's had experiences with UFOs and creatures he considers demons throughout his whole life. But before we get there, let's talk about how we got there. We started this book, and part 1 is up on the YouTube, so go check that out. But just kind of gave you guys a summary on some of the cool stuff we've learned so far. We started off learning about the Apollo 10 crew and how in a declassified transmission they revealed that they heard eerie science fiction music while they were in space, and they didn't want to report it to anyone because they felt everyone would think they were crazy. That led us into chapter 1, going over kind of the stigma of reporting UFOs and anomalies in general through astronauts and others. Also, we learned that when astronauts reach space, there's a certain percentage of them that feel at one with everything. They reach the Earth consciousness, and they come back to Earth and they're searching for something that is similar to that. Or they have a crazy dream, or they realize, one guy went up there and realized that he was Earth sensing instrument. That's what he said. He said like, oh, we're here to sense things for Mother Earth, right? And another dude went up there. He's in the middle of space, between like the dark moment of space, right? He's in between like the moon and Earth, and it's like complete darkness, and he sees this vast array of stars out there, and that's when he realizes we're not alone, and he feels this sense of oneness with everything. He comes back to Earth. He searches everywhere on Earth to find, you know, in the ancient texts, whatever it may be, to find something that talks about this feeling of oneness. The only place he finds it, I believe, is in the ancient Buddhist texts or Hindu texts, where it talks about samadha, which is the feeling of oneness. That's the only place he finds it. So it's like he, in our most future moment when we're in space, he realizes something that humans have realized in our most ancient moment. So I thought that was really cool. Then that moves us into this scientist named the Gray Man. Now the Gray Man is materials physicist, scientist in a laboratory in Australia, one of their top dudes there. Throughout his life, he has UFO encounters, and he even reports, the most gnarly thing about his story is this dude reports having an encounter with old Saint Michael. Now Saint Mike apparently appeared to him one night just floating above his head, his bedroom, like 4 feet away from him. He's peering into his soul. The Gray Man, who doesn't want to reveal his name for fear of ridicule and all the things we've gone over, says he felt just this deep loving from this entity. He asked the entity, hey, can I hug you? And the entity's like, nah, dude, you'll get hurt. I got a sword, blah, blah, blah. The Gray Man doesn't really believe what happened to him. He says he knows it's not a dream because he felt it was not like any other dream he's ever had. He felt conscious during it when he woke up, and when he woke up afterwards, it felt like he was knocked unconscious. So however you want to take it there. It's after this, however, where things start getting scary for the Gray Man. He starts having visions of, well, not visions. He wakes up and there's this standing at the foot of his bed. He says he feels all this rage, and he gets up and tackles it, and it just dematerializes, turns on all the lights in his house. Nothing's there. Then he starts getting visitations from little gray aliens. Now the Grays terrify him. He absolutely hates having encounters with the Grays. He doesn't really even like talking about it because he doesn't want it to happen again. He gets very angry. He also is trying to protect his kids. One night, he woke up. He realized his clothes were on backwards. He's like, oh, that's weird. I'm an idiot for going to bed that way. Then he realized his son's clothes were also on backwards and buttoned all the way up. His son is severely autistic and can't even really dress himself. That's why they have to sleep in the same bed. So this freaks him out, knowing that they both had some sort of encounter that they don't remember. So that's the Gray Man. The Gray Man brings us to Dr. Carrie Mullis. Now, Dr. Carrie Mullis is a big dog here who's had an encounter. Now, he's a Nobel Prize winner and Japan National Award for Science winner. He discovered like the polymers chain reactions or something like that in molecules. and he won the Nobel Prize for it. So he is out in his cabin in Northern California, just on a walk, you know, around the grounds, and he sees something glowing off in the distance. He decides to shine his flashlight at it, even though it's already glowing, and he sees what he calls an electric raccoon. He says, I can't describe it other than it looked like a raccoon that had been plugged into a light socket. He looks at the creature pauses and looks at him. The creature goes, hello, doctor. And Dr. Kerry Mullis doesn't remember what he said, but he said something, and next thing you know, boom, he's knocked out. Wakes up in the morning, his clothes are dry, which is weird, because it's Mendocino, and he wakes up outside. It's supposed to, you know, it's dewy and humidity and shit in the summer out there outside. So he wakes up, his clothes are dry and clean. He's a little freaked about that. He's also freaked because he's outside and walking up a hill. He doesn't know why. After that, he has more encounters with beings like this, and even, you know, communicates with them a little bit. But that's Dr. Kerry Mullis's encounter. He was so angry, just like the Gray Man. He was so angry about his encounter, he went back to the place where he saw the raccoon and shot it up. Blah, 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 boom. Hoping he would never see that pesky raccoon again. So that's Dr. Kerry Mullis and the Gray Man, two top scientists who have had unexplainable encounters with the unknown, whether it be interdimensional entities, angels, demons, UFOs, whatever the heck you want to call it. They've had it, right? What's also interesting about the Gray Man and his theory, right? Because he has his encounter with St. Michael. He gets crazy into this. He's like, he starts researching old Jack Parsons here. Now, if you don't know, Jack Parsons is the father of rocketry, basically the reason why we were able to escape the bounds of gravity and get into space with rockets. Werner von Braun is another one of those guys, this dude, but he credits Parsons with being the real OG rocket guy. Anywho, Parsons was known for being a bit of a freak. He liked to do rituals, sacrifices. You know, here's a book written about him here called Sex and Rockets, The Occult World of Jack Parsons, if that means anything. So they would do rituals and summon demons. Parsons worked with Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley was said to be in contact with a race of folks, spiritual entities called the Thelma, and they looked like gray aliens. That's the best way you could describe them. Now, Crowley is said to have done rituals and spoken to an entity that called itself a demon, and that's where they got information from. Parsons, same deal. Did dark rituals, occult magic, whatever you want to call it, and to talk to an entity to get ideas for his science. Now, the Gray Man is like this to me. The Gray Man says the Gray Man's theory is if they were doing this, and Parsons especially being a scientist, being someone who's logical and wouldn't do anything to waste time that's leading towards his larger goal, this had to have been working. They had to have been talking to something. They had to have been in communication with what they said they were in communication with. So I like to walk with Gray Man on that. Those rituals probably were working. They were talking to some sort of some sort of entity they figured opened up a line of communication. And that brings us back to encounters, because that's what this book is about. Different scientists who have an open line of communication or have been targeted and communicated with by entities from beyond the veil, beyond the pale, whatever you want to call them. So that is the Parsons, Crowley, and von Braun connection. And of course, Werner von Braun always seems to pop up in the stuff we read. If you're hanging around when we read The Devil's Chessboard, The Secret History of the CIA and the Shadow Government in America, good shit. He was brought over in Operation Paperclip. Cool fact about von Braun, apparently on his deathbed, he said to the person taking care of him that if there ever is an alien invasion, that it's fake. It's going to be a fake staged alien invasion in order to, you know, enact the ultimate conspiracy theorist dream of the or nightmare of the one world government, kind of get everyone under control. You know, that whole deal, the whole thing that's in Watchmen too, the whole ending there. Spoiler, sorry. But that's Werner von Braun. Phalian invasion, the great Phalian invasion that comes from this dude, Werner von Braun. But anywho, let's get into the wasteland and let's get into chapter 5. Tonight, we are learning about a soldier. Sorry, I want to say shoulder, soldier, who was a student of DW Pasulka. Pasulka is a professor of religious studies. So read all the ancient esoteric texts. She started studying UFOs because in these ancient texts that she was reading, religious texts, there's all these encounters with aerial phenomena. So she linked that up with the modern day aerial phenomena and wrote her first book, American Cosmic, which is all about that. And then herself became a bit of a believer in the unknown and UFOs and aliens and all that fun stuff, just like the other dudes we've read about. Just like classic Mr. Dr. Mack, who was a Harvard-trained psychologist, who for 40 years was a skeptic, staunch on this shit. Then he interviews hundreds of abductees, writes the book Abduction, where he is now a staunch believer that these people are experiencing something, being taken somewhere. So cool stuff. And also, just like Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was the OG scientist hired by the government, one of them, to do Project Blue Book, he became a skeptic to a believer. Skeptic, whatever, skeptic. You know what the hell I'm talking about. Anywho, he turned a believer too. So it's just interesting. That seems to be the theme that we run into here. Folks are non-believers, and then they do a little research and they become like, oh, you know what? I think there's something to this. So let's jump in. I'm excited for chapter 5. It's a deep one. So just get ready for it. It's a deeper chapter. There's some good encounters in it, but it's mainly got a lot of good thinking. At least I thought so. If you don't think so, you could tell me all about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay. Blanc. Oh, here we are. Oh, beautiful. It's a beautiful evening in the wasteland too. We're reading from Fallout 76, which is a really fun and laid back survival MMO. There's not a lot of people looking to just kill you and take your stuff, because you can't really do that. So it's nice. You can just hang out in your hot tub. It's also cool because it takes place in West Virginia, the home of Mothman, and we're right outside Point Pleasant. Sometimes during Mothman events, he shows up, destroys your base. So maybe tonight we'll get a visit. Who knows? But Encounters, Chapter 5, The Soldier. Let's go. We are starting, of course, with a quote from Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Pardon me if I butchered that name. This dude was a French warrior, soldier, philosopher from World War I didn't really know about him until I read this chapter. Seems like a total badass. We're going to learn more about him tonight, but let's read this quote by him. But the most important thing, if you've stopped by and you want to tell me about it in the comments, or if you're watching here right now live with me and you have a story of the unknown, or you've had an encounter yourself, and reading this book with me or listening to me or hanging out with me kind of knocks loose this encounter with a Bigfoot, a ghost, a ghoulie, chupacabra, momo, whatever it may be, please let me know, because as always,
ready to believe you.
I want to hear those stories. Chapter 5, let's roll. Buckle up, folks. Quote from Pierre Teilhard de Chardin: terrestrial thought is becoming conscious that it constitutes an organic whole endowed with the power of growth, and both capable of and responsible for the future. And we're going to learn all about what that means tonight. We're talking about the new sphere, what Chardin realized in the chaos of the battlefield, the chaos of trench freaking warfare in World War I. On Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, otherwise known as All Saints' Day, Catholics all over the world give thanks and respect to those who have died and were martyred for their hope and action for a just world. They also ask for intervention from the deceased to help in their efforts to continue the creation of a just world. These martyrs are known as saints because they have transitioned into the world beyond the physical world. On this day, it is believed that the separation between the living and the dead is open, and that communication between them flows freely. On this day, I noticed my former student's post on social media indicating that he was about to travel to England, and it would be the first time since he had been a soldier many years ago, but not that many. He would be traveling outside the United States. Jose mentioned that his body did not know the difference between then and now, which meant that his body thought he was going to war to fight a battle. Yo, Tag, what up, my dude? Learning about a soldier today who is one of DW's students who's had encounters throughout his life. So he hadn't been out of the country since he was deployed, and he was going to London. And he made a post because he was feeling weird about it because his body felt the same, right? His body felt like he was going to war to fight a battle. On this day, Jose posted and publicly asked for the intervention and support of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, a French Jesuit priest who is not a saint by official Catholic recognition, but is a saint to many, including me. He was a soldier in World War I and was awarded the highest French Order of Merit one can attain as a soldier and as a civilian. That's such a badass freaking warrior philosopher. His experience of direct combat on the front woke him up to an organic network that he later termed the New Sphere. In the midst of trench warfare, he witnessed the battle of boys who died and left their surviving brothers devastated and spattered in blood and tears. And here he saw Earth's soul rise. Chardin described Earth's soul, or the New Sphere, as a culmination of a process of human evolution that proceeds from the geosphere and eventually encompasses the biosphere of human thought, sentiment, and information. It is a network, or a world network, of economic and psychic affiliations that is being woven at an ever-increasing speed, which envelops and constantly penetrates more deeply within each of us. It is an organic development, and some have seen in Chardin's vision the internet, yet Chardin did not separate humans from their environment. Instead, he wrote that they create it and are created by it. The New Sphere is life setting out upon a second adventure from the springboard it established when it created humankind. It is the next stage of evolution for human intelligence. It could be the next branch of Homo sapiens. So I think that's like, for me when I read that, to understand what Chardin or Hardin, whatever his freaking name is, to understand what he was saying, is the universal consciousness, kind of what we've read about, or Earth's consciousness, what we've read about in other books and we're seen in other places. Or if you're like what it made me, when I was first reading that paragraph, it made me think of Swamp Thing and the DC comic books, because he goes to the green and he's able to communicate with all of Mother Earth, all the plants on Mother Earth, or on the plants on Earth, and he calls it the green. I feel like the New Sphere is kind of like that for all of living creatures, or and Earth included, right? It's kind of like this living internet, like the internet before the internet, which is what we read about a little bit in previous chapters. So interesting. Oh yes, that's what we read about with the. It's like the communication that a lot of indigenous cultures have with Earth, or with the consciousness of animals. When we learned about the secret order of the dolphin, right? Scientists trying to learn how to communicate with dolphins, trying to learn that Earth consciousness, or that Earth language. A day passed and I called Jose. He had not left the country yet. I saw your post about Chardin. I like that you called upon him on Dia de los Muertos, I said. I wanted to acknowledge that I understood Jose's reasoning, as I thought it was inspired. Strangely, it turned out that while he did ask for Chardin's intervention, he forgot it was Dia de los Muertos. So his post on that day was a coincidence. Ah, I forgot it was that day, he said. There was a silence as we both took in There was a silence as we both took that in. It was as significant to him as it was to me. Of all the days in which Jose had lived, he chose that one day to ask for saintly intervention, and not just from anyone, but from a Jesuit soldier and philosopher who predicted the coming choice for humanity to live with or die by technology. I've known Jose for 10 years. He is a young man. And when I met him as an undergraduate student in my university department, he was a Marine who had just returned from Afghanistan. I recall seeing him sitting in the very back corner of a large class that I taught, as if he didn't want to be seen. He was actually hard to miss. Among the sea of bright colors worn by my students from the South, he stood out in plain black and white clothes, wearing black Buddy Holly style glasses. There was something familiar about him, but I wasn't sure what it was. I ascribed the feeling to having a common home state, California. Jose had spent some of his youth in Los Angeles, and his style reflected that, but I learned that I was wrong about his hometown. I found out that he grew up in New Mexico, in a pueblito called Artesia, about 45 minutes from Roswell. That's the confirmation I needed, Diana, he said, referring to the coincidence. I've been asking for a sign all week, a sign that I'm on the right path. I was still taking in the layers of meanings associated with the connection, the day and the request for help. If there was one person I knew who understood Chardin's philosophy from the inside out, who lived it daily, it was Jose. Jose, wow, you didn't know? That's weird, I said. He's your saint, a philosopher and a soldier. He foresaw a tech takeover and a fork in the road for humanity, way before the computer or the internet. Yeah, I know. Jose was on his way to be interviewed for a docuseries on which I had been a consultant. It was about UFOs. Jose, though, made it very clear that he couldn't stand the topic. He made this known to me and the production team members who were filming the docuseries. Apparently, that didn't dissuade them in the least from wanting to interview him, as Jose's life has been punctuated by UFO events. Before looking into those, however, it is necessary to provide the context of a life of UFO contact. Jose, like many experiencers, does not just experience consistent UFO events, he also sees them as natural occurrences that dot the landscape of a life imbued with spiritual meaning and choices. They are not events to be separated and extracted from his life and then studied. Many experiencers see the UFO event as natural as they view the public hysteria around the Many experiencers see the UFO event as natural, and they view the public hysteria around it as unnecessary and even harmful. It is a distraction from their mission, and almost all experiencers have a mission. And this reminds me of our brief read-through of Abduction by old John Mack. Where each abductee he talks to is given a mission. It also reminds me of when we read the Andreessen affair, when old Betty Andreessen was abducted. She also received a mission to spread this message of love. That was her mission. Most of the abductees in abduction as well have similar missions, more like, protect Earth, warnings of disasters to come, warnings about nuclear weapons, all that stuff, but each one has a mission. So it's super interesting. And what's great about DW, we don't really waste time on talking about all those different things. We know that's out there. If you want to learn about that, it's out there in all the different abduction literature. Every person she interviews represents thousands of people who have had similar experiences. So if Matthew Roberts, who called his own UFO event an initiation, were to see a timeline of Jose's life, he might say that Jose's initiation started when he was just a child, before he had a choice of whether he wanted to be initiated. Now Jose's on the far side of initiation, and there is nothing he can do about it except to reach for the future. To reach for the future is not an easy path. When a person chooses to do that, it means the person's present is not, nor has been, optimal. Reaching for the future is a choice between two options: usually between whether to live or to die. This characterization is not an exaggeration. The mental health of United States military veterans and of American youth in the early 21st century is at a point of crisis. And this is like real and sad shit. Like, we do have a mental health crisis. We need to stay happy and healthy out there. We need to stay positive. So, if you're out there, I love you, and I'm sending you my positive vibes. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out. Suicide is the fourth leading cause of death among teenagers. And among young veterans, it's the second leading cause of death. Yeah, that's so bad. Among the students who filter through my department, I've observed that while all of them are very smart, most travel through to pick up a degree that will help them gain entrance to graduate or law school. Some, like Jose, come because they recognize that the red pill of philosophy and religious studies is option one in the two options they have. It was certainly that for Jose. Within the first year of being a university student, Jose organized a weekly meeting of military veterans from across the university. They met in the department's philosophy seminar room and shared their stories. The intention of the weekly meetings was to help the veterans avoid suicide. Jose became a conduit of meaning, and thus hope, for a growing group of young men and women. He also organized a project to help at-risk children. He found a plot of land, and through a series of negotiations, he was able to start a sustainable agricultural project that helped the children in two ways. First, it allowed them to stay offline and grow their own food. That's nice. Stay offline and grow your own food, kids. Now that is a fucking future I want to live in, dude. Oh my gosh. Now hold on, I need to get a little bit of coffee here. We're feel like we're through the looking glass, man. We're in some heavy shit right now. I need a little coffee and a little Agent Cooper.
You know, this is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee.
Yeah, staying offline and growing food. That's what I was thinking about. Dude, that's what schools should do. Everyone's got to put their fucking electronics in a box, and that's put away for the day. Then you just go, you learn how to grow food, but there's also not factory equipment, science equipment, medical equipment, athletics, anything you want to get into. It's more like I read back in the day, schools were, for lack of a better word, I want to call it an anarchy school. Kind of just open, right? And this is, the way school is now didn't happen until the Model T was introduced, because the Model T had such an efficient way of making it in the factory system. The minds that be at the time were like, it would be good if we applied the factory system to education, just treated everybody the same and put them through the factory, pooped them out, made them great citizens. So that's kind of what the education system's based on. It's not based on like a beautiful Socratic or like ancient philosophy view of education where you're finding some passion or finding something to just better yourself with and just following that. It's based, education's about making you a good citizen so you pay your taxes and get a job and shit. Well, at least that's what the system's trying to do. But it's like, it makes me think about that. A school like that, a program for kids, getting them offline and growing food. That's tight. Anywho, whoop, 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 back to the reading. Went off the rails there. So second, it allowed them to learn business skills. They grew chili peppers and sold the sauce to sustain the farm. That is tight. See, that's how you teach kids to survive in the world and to thrive. What most people don't understand about philosophy is that the point is not just information. Rather, it is power and a force. Learning philosophical philosophical traditions produces powerful effects in the lives of those who receive it. I learned that many philosophers acknowledged that for them, philosophy was not a choice but a necessity. And some even said that it was the necessary choice that prevented their suicide. I was never surprised to find this out, yet I was surprised to learn how many philosophers stated it publicly. Hannah Arendt, a philosopher from Germany, who is interned in and then escaped from a women's concentration camp, badass, in the 1940s because she was Jewish, wrote a poem when she was 17, years before her internment, that illustrates the sentiment of how one reaches for the future. And this poem is badass as the lady Hannah Arendt. German Jewish philosopher who was locked up in a concentration camp and escaped in the 40s. When she was 17, she wrote this poem, eerily foreshadowing the attitude she would need to survive in the future. The hours run down, the days pass on. One achievement remains: merely being alive. Right? To me, I love fucking poems like that. It's like, yes, merely being alive is the one achievement as the hours run down and the days pass on. That is beautiful. That's all you need to achieve. Merely being alive. You've done it. Congratulations. That's all you need to do. Push forward. Philosophy for some is literally life. I've observed that those who endeavor to reach for the future are sometimes ritually rewarded. 1 year after Arendt wrote that poem, she met the philosopher Martin Heidegger. Through him, and importantly not because of him, she received the tradition of thinking or dialectical philosophy, which involves being actively engaged in thinking and reflection to the point of where it becomes a moral sense. Like Jose, she had done the necessary work of reaching for the future, so she received a greatly improved upon tradition of thinking. She received it from Heidegger. Her legacy lives through her books, interviews, and the people who knew her. As her friend philosopher Karl Jaspers noted, philosophizing is real, as it pervades an individual life at a given moment. I was privileged to see philosophy enter and pervade Jose's life. I also benefited from it, as he transitioned from a soldier to a philosopher soldier, and to someone whose opinion I came to trust. What I have termed reaching for the future is a way of life. Jose learned it through his military training. Like Chardin, he was on the front line of war in which he witnessed the deaths of people who were his brothers in every way except by blood. He was part of a small squadron of men who by necessity and through the specter of the ever-present threat of death by sniper or explosion were highly attuned to each other and their environment. Jose felt the electric current that Chardin called Earth's soul. Before ever hearing about Chardin's philosophy, Jose identified this current as a network that linked him to a mental, physical, and emotional states of his brothers and information about the Afghanistan terrain and people. The information it provided was life-giving. He knew who to trust, where to go, and what areas to leave. Seems like a very valuable thing to have on a battlefield. He avoided explosions and snipers. His brothers called him lucky. He told me that the network is what kept him alive. It didn't keep all his brothers alive, sadly. This fact is Jose's scar, and he bears it today. It is also his connection to the network and the motivation to live. Years after Jose graduated from my university, I vented my frustration about the state of the world and how even though I felt hopeless, I was functionally hopeful because my actions were predicated on the belief that they would help people and not hurt people. The conversation that ensued from this complaint outlined Jose's assessment of the current state of our nation and was the meta warscape, which is virtual and physical. According to Jose, we are the targets and soldiers in a war of which most people are unaware. He did emphasize with the feeling of hopelessness, but he reminded me that people have been here before, and through them we learn, we correct, we continue. Amen. In medieval Japan, the living dead was a way of life for samurai soldiers, Jose said. It is a rare thing to see that today. It is also disastrous without a guide and a team. For example, during World War II, the atrocities committed by Japanese soldiers were unfathomable. It was Bushido, the ethical code of the samurai soldiers, that enabled them to commit those atrocities. The ever-present reality of their death pushed them to a mental state that you describe. My point is that God has to be central in this pathway, or one could get lost. I think most people today understand this but have no real leader. I also think this mode of thinking is only understood by warriors who have discipline. I know you are aware of the complexity of players. I know you are aware of the complexity and players who run this world, he said. When you bring it up, there's sadness in your tone. I read it like this. You think, this is an unattainable goal. I can do nothing but try. That is right. You can only try. But you seem to think that is something trivial, to just try, when in reality, that is it. That is the answer. When a person tries beyond knowing if what they will try will work, they commit an absolute to a cause, which requires them to be a leader, subject to the burden of command. Fucking beautiful. This is a lonely road because you cannot entirely express fears, worries, despair, happiness, or joy. This is why I hate being in leadership positions. To be the cornerstone of hope requires great individual sacrifice across all situations and experiences. And, depending on what you're fighting for, death lingers. But it has to come from you with the complete knowledge of all the good and bad that comes with it. As my old man used to tell me, you can't be a weakened warrior in a war. I have no idea if Jose's past created the person that he is presently, or if he was born a philosopher soldier. Perhaps it was a combination of both. I do know that Jose was born into a war that is being waged here in the United States, and he never left it. His teaching, which I finally understood after 10 years of resistance, is that in the battlefield, we have defeated racism. Jose told me that in the battlefield is a space of equality and enlightenment. When he first said this to me in my university office many years ago, I was nauseous. I took a few steps away from him at the time because I was shocked by his words. I considered myself a pacifist. I believe and still do that under no circumstances is war acceptable. Yet, the force of his statement, coupled with my knowledge of his integrity, took me aback. I didn't believe what he said, but belief has nothing to do with something that is true. Ooh, ain't that the truth? It ain't about belief, it's about the truth. And yeah, Jose, that sounds, I mean, not that I fucking know, but that just sounds right. That there's enlightenment, there has to be, because the battlefield is life or death, so there has to be enlightenment on the battlefield. Interesting. All right, but I love it. I love the philosophy love fest we're having today in this chapter. Event 1. Now we've made it, folks. We've learned about Jose. We've learned about the integrity of the man, the history of the man. Now let's learn about some of the strange events that have happened to him through his life, that have led him to this connection with the new sphere, with the Earth's consciousness, whatever you want to call it. Event 1, El Demonio, San Antonio, Texas. By the time Jose was born, his father had been forcibly recruited by La M, the Mexican mafia. Big, scary deal. If you don't know about him, Google it. According to Jose's deceased mother, Celeste, her husband, Gavril, had been... Sorry, I gotta do that part again. According to Jose's deceased mother, Celeste, her husband, Gavril, had been a handyman doing small jobs for the community when one day he was kidnapped, put into the back of a car, and taken to an isolated field, and told that he had two choices, to work for La M or die. he chose to live, forced into a life of the sicarios and traficandos. Their código, or code, was kill or get killed. That's a lot like, it reminds me of when that happened to sailors back in the day. You go out drinking in a port town and you just wake up because you were drugged or knocked out, taken through some underground tunnel. You'd wake up just on a boat, middle of the ocean. All right, you got to work now. Kind of the same thing, but with a gun to your head. Jose's family lived in an apartment in the Aztlan Apache courts. It was in the center of San Antonio, and Jose was born at the beginning of the deadliest decade in that city's history. During that time, it became known as the Drive-By City. Thousands died in drive-by shootings or were incarcerated for perpetuating them, fueled by a surge of gang activity. Many of the communities affected, most still bear the scars of the most violent periods in the city's history. And that's just like that, it's just wild to learn about these insanely violent periods in history that we don't know. I mean, maybe people know, but if you're not from San Antonio, I had no idea thousands died from drive-bys in this time. That's freaking wild. It reminds me of Cocaine Cowboys, that really good documentary, the original one. I haven't seen all the other ones. It's like a franchise now. But the OG one that focuses just on Miami, it was like a war zone down there. It's like crazy that it's not just in regular old history books when you're in school, right? Anywho, the family's apartment had one room and a bathroom. The floor in the apartment were gray cement. The family would put down one single mattress to sleep together at nighttime. There was no frame for the mattress. They slept close to the ground and directly under a window so bullets would not hit them during the drive-by shootings that punctuated the night. His two sisters slept underneath the window. Jose slept in the middle, and his mother slept near the edge farthest from the window. We usually huddled together so my mom and sisters would know immediately if there was any disturbance, Jose said. Amid the sea of violence, at the age of 3, Jose contended with what he calls El Demonio, the demon. That night, I woke up with great terror, something I had never experienced. It felt as if a heaviness had enveloped me and slowed time down. But inside, I felt constant terror. Almost like at the peak of realizing the terror, it would be renewed, he said. I was awake and attempted to shout. I looked to my left and my right, but was completely locked. I tried to raise my voice, but I couldn't summon any volume. The moment Jose realized that he couldn't wake his family, he saw a black figure at the end of the mattress. He could not make out any features except for glowing eyes. It peeked at him and then reached out for his feet. The demon grabbed Jose and dragged him to the edge of the mattress. As you may know, a mattress is only about a foot high while lying flat on the ground, so it would be impossible for someone to sneak up on you in a low crawl and pull you, he noted. The demon had as much trouble dragging me as I did trying to break out of my paralysis. It seemed to struggle in this physical environment. It shifted its form a few times like it wasn't physical like we are. It could shapeshift. After a struggle where I fought to stay on the mattress, I guess I passed out. The next morning, Jose did not talk about what happened. To him, he was just 3 years old. In his young mind, these were things that just happened, and for him, they were normal, like sleeping on a mattress with your family under a window to avoid being shot by a spray of bullets in your sleep. That was event 1. And it's like, I want to read more literature on sleep paralysis and the beings people are said to have encountered, or whatever it may be that they're encountering, because that's a gnarly one. And the fact that he used 3 and remembers it so vividly, it's interesting. And being physically pulled off the bed, if that's what happened. Like, event 2, Los Demonios. So it looks like we got multiple demons. An orange orb, Artesia, New Mexico. During this time in Jose's life, he recalls many fights between Gavril and Jose's mother, Gavril and Jose's mother, Celeste. Most were about Gavril's job. One day, Jose said his father and several of his associates showed up to their apartment with a large plastic garbage bag. They came through the door, and Jose said that his mother was very upset. Jose felt that his father and the men came to the apartment to wait, to hide out, and they did wait. They sat in the small apartment and said nothing for several hours. Then they left. Years later, Jose's sisters told him that the bags contained the hacked up body parts of people who had offended La M. It was after this instance that Gavril sought to leave the organization. Due to the unusual circumstances of life in a cartel, his exit would also have to be unusual. The intervention was an organized, strategic, and secret effort to make Jose's family, including his father, disappear from San Antonio. It was organized by the pastor of a Christian outreach program from Artesia, New Mexico. The pastor of the church recruited Gavril to become a pastor himself and to change his life completely. He was to help men break free from similar life as the life he led. Gavril and his family moved to Artesia. They prayed many hours a day, and Jose attended a non-denominational group. At this time, he said he became aware of a knowing. There was no point I can identify when the knowing came, he said. I just became aware of it at the age of 7. When I think about it now, it reminds me of having my internal life GPS. It was also at this age that I began to pray. Growing up, we'd be forced to pray on our knees for a couple hours every day, multiple times. Most of my prayers consisted of having a heart like David, who was brave and wise, and to be wise like Solomon. Maybe that's where the knowing and safety came from, or some like the force or God answering my prayers. When information came to me, it was never as something that I had been thinking about or mulling over. It was something that would just appear in my mind. Not only did I know certain things, but I also had a secure feeling that I was protected. An example is when I received a sudden information about my mother's mortality. I just knew she was going to die of cancer. Her death didn't bother me. Sorry about that. Her death didn't bother me because my heart and perspective were innocent. As the years passed by, everything felt just right. The rightness reminds me of my time overseas when there was a sense of security that everything would be all right. On the few occasions this was tested, one night coming back from work at the Burger King, a guy in a black F-150 tried to kidnap me and then run me over. I don't know how I escaped. I out-sprinted an F-150. I know adrenaline makes you do superhuman feats, but the proximity of the truck to me was so short. Luckily, I made it to the apartment. Years later, I saw this man at church, drunk and crying. I wanted to kill him, but I saw his pain and I let it be. Jose may have left the drive-by city, but he could never escape the ever-present battle. It was in his neighborhood, his house, and even at church. His family attended a charismatic Christian church where members felt the Holy Spirit and often fell under a trance of glossolalia, or speaking in tongues. What a fancy name for that. Word of the night, glossolalia, which means speaking in tongues. Jose reported that sometimes people appeared possessed, and he witnessed on many occasions the pastors and parishioners delivering demons from their bodies. There was this very, very tiny lady, he recalled. One moment she was praying, and the next she started to speak in tongues. Her body shook, and then she kind of went crazy. It was apparent that she wasn't herself. This lady was very small, but it took 4 grown men to hold her down and to make sure she didn't hurt anyone or herself because she was flailing around. Everyone in the church prayed for her. She was delivered of whatever it was that she had in her. I saw this happen a lot. There's another invisible reality, and some of the things, let's call them demons, they intend to harm you. The family would sometimes make this trip back to San Antonio to visit family during the drive through the desert. We're on a little ad break on Twitch here, so I'm just going to take a little pausey. Be back though. The family would sometimes make trips to San Antonio to visit family. During the drive through the desert, they encountered an unknown aerial phenomenon. The drive from Ansonia to Artesia is a 10-hour drive, and in between is a lot of desert. While driving through the night, this orange-reddish orb shot through our car. I don't recall this, but my sister does. Jose was reticent to ask his father about the incident because, like Jose, Gavril doesn't like to talk about it. During the years that I have known Jose, I have known that he regularly experiences aerial phenomena. As we sat at a coffee shop, he told me stories of the demons. He laughed and said, "Diana, check this out. This happened yesterday." He took his phone out of his pocket and told me how he had seen something in the sky, an unknown thing. He said he had been playing with some children from the neighborhood, and he looked up to see beautiful, beautiful pink cloud formation. He felt the knowing, and he felt like he should take a photo, but he resisted. It became very strong, however, and he took a series of photos of the clouds. What's strange about this is that I didn't see anything up in the sky except for these pretty clouds, he said. He found the photos on his phone and enlarged one. He showed it to me. There in the middle of the pink cloud was a black object. It appeared to look like a jet airplane, but it wasn't a jet airplane. It looked like someone had drawn a cartoon jet airplane in the sky and then smudged it with their thumb. He went to the next photo and enlarged that one. Same object appeared. We both laughed. "Okay, that's weird," I said. It is weird. This happens all the time to me, as you know." I did know. As with many people who had confided similar experiences, Jose would have thought to look up in the sky, and there he would see an orb or an unidentifiable object. There appeared to be a connection between these knowings and the objects. I also know that Jose hates this topic, so he only reluctantly tells me when he sees orbs and aerial phenomena. And he sees them more than he tells. I never push him to tell me anything. I respect that he despises the topic of UFOs, and I know why he does. I mean, yeah, it makes sense. Oh, it's just so, like, I love the way DW writes this book because it's like a beautiful way of tying together all the, I guess, for lack of the better word, tropes of alien encounters that we've read about. It happens a lot. It's not just like one encounter. People have encounters throughout their lives, typically. People who are in contact or whatever you want to call it. This is interesting. The media that surrounds UFOs has been controlled in the United States since the 1940s by programs like Project Blue Book. Their mission to debunk and stigmatize people who report experiences worked. Throughout the entire time since the end of Project Blue Book, programs have been in place to continue to debunk and stigmatize experiencers to put off any serious researchers. And of course, Project Blue Book in the 40s, the Air Force, I believe, sets up this program to collect all UFO and strange item reports. Collect them all, and the point is to debunk them. They hire scientists strictly to debunk these things and tell the people all you saw was swamp gas, or you were hallucinating, or that was just ball lightning, or whatever, whatever they want to say. But however, the first scientists they hired, one of them being the OG, Dr. Hynek, became believers. And so the Air Force was like, what the fuck? And they hired another group of scientists at a college to look at Project Blue Book. And those guys, they just debunked everything. Now, there are a couple cases that we've been over here on the channel ourselves about, like, especially the Hopkinsonville goblins that were never able to be solved. But that's what DW's talking about when she talks about Project Blue Book. It was a concerted effort by scientists to disprove every UFO encounter, and then make it public that they were all disproved, thus making the public feel that they're ridiculous if they see a UFO. Throughout the entire time since the end of Project Blue Book, programs have been in place to continue to debunk and stigmatize experiencers and to put off any serious researchers. One look into the communities of social media and entertainment media surrounding the topic reveals a clown show of participants that puts off any credible researcher. I feel like I'm part of that clown show. But we're reading the books. The clown show is trying to entertain people to get more people at least in on it. I just felt like she was like, that's me. Don't be scared off, researchers. We're friendly clowns. Additionally, once one looks into the data surrounding the phenomena, it doesn't at all resemble the narrative of the militarized UFO. Reports of direct experience with the phenomena suggest that they are more in line with the religious or spiritual experiences, both good and bad. People who have ongoing experiences with UFOs also report spiritual and psychological experiences, just like Jose's and the Gray Man's. Jose's attitude towards the UFOs are how he often feels and then sees what UFO encounters most often look like. They are not like the encounters represented in the media, and they are not like how they have been presented by the military. And this is why Jose doesn't talk about the topic. He doesn't want his spiritual experiences of the UFO encounters to be appropriated and used as a means to bolster the military UFO. Amen. That's so cool. Fuck the military UFO, whatever that is. The one they had old Bob Lazar work on. Just experience it, you know? Just live in the grandeur that it's real and you can experience it. Don't try and shoot it down or understand it. Los Demonios, or the demons, showed up again just after Jose's mother passed away. He had been on life support and in a coma. Before she went into the coma, Jose was able to hug her and tell her that he loved her. If she had not passed, I never would have left Artesia, he said. It was 3 days after her death that the demons reappeared, and this time there were many of them. 3 days had passed when the demons returned, Jose continued. A gradual buildup of intense dark energy enveloped everything. Finally, on the 3rd day, I came back to my apartment and something felt off. Despite this feeling, I went to my room and went to bed. When I woke, it was with immense terror. Like before, I attempted to turn on my back and reach for my cell phone, but the force had a grasp on me and a hold on my body and made this simple task difficult. I had been a football player and worked hard labor jobs. I was strong, but I wasn't strong enough to move through this force. With a huge effort, I made it onto my back and saw the demons floating and moving with contrasting and shifting blackness. I couldn't tell you for how long I stared into their blackness, and then, like before, I just passed out. What I remember is waking up the next day and calling my dad and telling him what happened. He came over with holy olive oil and dabbed the apartment and prayed. He told me that they wouldn't be back. Jose's father made use of holy oil or olive oil, which people had prayed and which had been blessed. Oils, not medicals. Oils, metals, and other objects are within the Christian tradition called sacramentals. They are objects of power that people wear and utilize for protection against the forces of evil. Not all Christians who use sacramentals believe in their power, but sacramentals have traditionally been utilized in these ways. After his father's rite of exorcism, the demons never returned. The spiritual warfare I experienced in my youth prepared me to identify how war is being waged today, Jose said. And this is the big one. This goes back to what that cryptic message he had about the invisible war being waged, right? The spiritual warfare I experienced in my youth prepared me to identify how war is being waged today, Jose said. The weapons of the big players are more insidious than they were in the former wars because they don't look like weapons. We hold them in our hands and in our pockets. They contain our social media, our weather reports, and they're addictive. They are a direct connection to the battlefield, yet we view them as toys. Try to take these weapons away from your children, they will cry. Jose was referring to our phones. Further conversations with Jose confirmed that he believed that there are at least 2 networks, the organic network, or Chardin's Earth Soul, and the internet. In his view, the UFO shows up when one is connected to the organic network, the one described by Chardin. However, one should not under any circumstances focus on the UFO. It's just one aspect of the ongoing reality that involves other supernatural events, and that reveals that one aspect, that one has accepted one's life mission, according to Jose. So if you've had an encounter with the unknown, something that's made you feel strange, that means you are on, to Jose, someone who's encountered this stuff throughout his whole life, the philosopher soldier would say that just means you're on the right path, baby. I love that. That's awesome. So That is chapter 5. That is Jose. The next chapter is chapter 6. I don't even know what we're going to get into here. We're going to learn more about Jacques Vallée, which is awesome. We love that man. So we're going to learn more about that guy in chapter 6. But that's chapter 5, the soldier philosopher, who's had many encounters, who has felt a knowing all his life that's kind of guided him, not kind of, that has guided him through his whole life, has experienced aerial phenomenon all the time, but also dark entities in the dead of night. That is Encounters chapter 5. Thank you for joining me for the Midnight Book Club. Next week we're going to continue reading, diving into more UFO encounters. Let's look ahead. What is this? Yes. So next week we will be learning more all about UFO and alien encounters. Jacques Vallée, Alan J. Hynek, Rosicrucianism. Okay, yes, that's going to be sweet. History of Satan, all that stuff. Well, briefly it's mentioned in here. I'm just looking at seeing words. So the paranormal and esoteric side of UFOs is what we're diving into next week for chapter 6. We got a brief introduction to that with Jose, who's had experiences with demons and UFOs his entire life. So that was the Midnight Book Club. Thank you so much for